This is HFY Vanguard, where a single human touch can shatter empires, and one forbidden hug can rewrite the laws of a world. The story begins now. The diplomatic vessel Elysian Crown descended through the luminous veil of Astral Station Epsilon's docking corridor, its hull glinting with polished gold and obsidian under the glow of starlight. The Tavari emblem, a spiral of twin comets, was etched across the prow, a symbol of elegance, order, and unyielding tradition. Inside, the air shimmered faintly with controlled temperature and a perfume of ceremonial incense designed to calm the senses before any diplomatic event. Vizara Tavari stood before the mirror in her private chamber, adjusting the golden filigree on her formal attire. Each thread carried meaning, lineage, status, duty. Her dress was woven from star lace, a material that seemed to drink in the light and release it as subtle glimmers across her azure skin. Every motion was practiced, every gesture calibrated. Nothing about a Tavari emissary could be left to chance. Outside, technicians and aides moved in silent precision. Tavari culture valued quiet efficiency. Emotion was a weakness, spontaneity a sin. Vizara's reflection stared back at her, a flawless envoy, a daughter of House Tavari, future successor to Lord Callan Tavari, one of the Confederation's most powerful trade lords. Yet beneath the flawless surface, her pulse quickened. This was her first mission as chief negotiator. Alone, representing her people before the humans, a race that fascinated and unsettled the Confederation in equal measure. Humans were impulsive, unpredictable, and alarmingly direct. Vizara had studied them extensively, their diplomacy based on sincerity rather than ceremony, their greetings often tactile, their humor chaotic. She had prepared herself to endure their eccentricities, but she would not yield Tavari decorum. Lady Tavari, her pilot's voice came through the comms, steady and respectful. Docking sequence complete. The human delegation awaits in the reception hall. Vizara took a deep breath and whispered the mantra of her house poise. Protocol, power. The airlock hissed open. The corridor beyond was lit by the soft blue glow of Epsilon's ambient lights, reflecting off polished floors in perfect symmetry. As she stepped forward, her long, silver-white hair flowed behind her like liquid light. Her escort followed at a respectful distance, recording the moment for the Confederation archives. The reception hall loomed ahead, modest by Tavari standards, but clean, functional with a strange warmth to its design. Human banners fluttered beside the holographic insignias of the Confederation. The blend of aesthetics made Vizara's heart tighten. To her eyes, it looked undisciplined. Then she saw him. At the center of the human delegation stood a tall man with short blonde hair and striking green eyes that seemed to hold the color of living forests, something rare in a galaxy of metallic tones. His uniform bore the insignia of Earth's diplomatic corps, but he stood with a relaxed posture that ignored half the rules Vizara lived by. When his gaze met hers, he smiled a bright, unrestrained smile that cut through the formality of the moment like a supernova. For a heartbeat, she forgot the speech she had memorized. Commander Matthew Davis, the protocol officer, began to announce, voice formal and distant. But before he could finish, the human moved. In 3 long strides, Matt closed the distance between them. The Tavari delegation stiffened instantly. Guards raised their brows, uncertain whether to intervene. Vizara herself froze as her training screamed warnings inside her mind. Protocol dictated that he should bow no lower than 30 degrees and wait for her to extend her hand. A handshake was the most physical contact ever permitted in a first greeting. Anything more would be scandalous. Instead, Matt Davis wrapped his arms around her. It was sudden, warm, and completely alien to every fiber of her being. His embrace was firm, yet careful, lifting her slightly off her feet. The scent of his uniform, ozone metal faint spice, filled her senses. Little Vizara, he murmured, voice deep and familiar. Look at you, all grown up. The words hit her like a memory reborn. He knows me. Her eyes widened. 10 years ago, a young human officer had visited her father's estate, a curious guest who had laughed too loudly and taught her how to skip stones across the reflecting pools. He had promised to return someday, but humans age faster. She had assumed he was long gone. You were supposed to greet me according to protocol. She managed, her voice trembling between indignation and shock. Matt's laugh echoed through the hall, rich, warm, utterly inappropriate. Protocols for strangers. You and I aren't strangers, Vizara. All around them, aides and guards whispered in disbelief. The Confederation's live feed cameras captured every second, the alien emissary rigid with astonishment, and the human captain smiling as if greeting an old friend at a family reunion. Her heart pounded. His warmth lingered on her skin like electricity. Outrage battled with something else, something far more dangerous. When he finally released her, Vizara stepped back, face burning, an iridescent shade of indigo. Commander Davis, she said sharply, this is highly irregular. Captain now, he corrected with a wink, and I specifically requested this assignment when I heard House Tavari was sending a representative. Though I barely recognized you. Last time I saw you, you were barely this tall. He held a hand to his chest level, grinning. The protocol officer cleared his throat, flustered. Perhaps we should proceed with the formal introductions. Of course, Matt said lightly, but his eyes never left Vizara's. Though I'd say Lady Tavari and I have a bit of catching up to do. As they walked toward the conference chamber, Vizara's thoughts whirled. This human is chaos incarnate. He was supposed to follow the ceremony, not obliterate it. And yet, his presence had a gravity she couldn't ignore. The warmth of his hug still radiated through her chest, a forbidden echo of comfort. I trust you still remember how to skip stones, he whispered as they entered the corridor leading to the meeting hall. Vizara's composure cracked for the briefest second. The corner of her mouth twitched upward. I've improved my technique considerably, Captain. Then I'll expect a demonstration, he said with a grin that felt like sunlight breaking through a storm. Her escort exchanged worried glances. The Tavari delegation was scandalized. But Vizara found herself, despite everything, breathing easier. For the first time in her career, she felt human chaos brushing against Tavari perfection. And it didn't feel entirely wrong. The conference chamber aboard Astral Station Epsilon was a study in understated elegance. A long oval table of polished Terran wood dominated the center, and Earth export expensive and symbolic. Holographic panels floated above, projecting trade charts and diplomatic seals. Vizara took her seat with precise posture, flanked by aides who adjusted data slates and whispered procedural reminders. Across the table, Matt sat with casual grace, one ankle resting over his knee, stylus tapping idly against his lips. The terms proposed by House Tavari are clear. Vizara began, a voice steady. A 15% increase in dilithium exports in exchange for exclusive access to Earth's agricultural advancements. Matt leaned back. 15%, huh? You don't go easy on your friends. It's a fair adjustment given the current supply chains and production costs, she countered automatically. The Confederation already benefits from human terraforming equipment. He smiled faintly. Still the perfectionist. You always used to furrow your brows like that when you concentrated. Her stylus paused mid-note. I beg your pardon. You just did it, he teased, mimicking her expression. That little crease between your eyebrows. Vizara's assistant nearly dropped his tablet in horror. The human was mocking her in open session, yet Matt's tone held no malice, only a kind of affection that disarmed even her sharpest retort. The rest of the meeting blurred. Each exchange between them was a dance of opposites, formality versus instinct, ritual versus sincerity. By the time the session ended, the Tavari delegation was exhausted while the humans seemed amused. Later, alone in her private quarters, Vizara stood by the viewport overlooking the nebula. The galaxy stretched beyond the glass, vast and indifferent. And yet her mind kept circling back to a single reckless moment, the warmth of human arms, the sound of a laugh that defied centuries of protocol. Every great change in history, she recalled, had begun with a breach of rules. She pressed her palm against the cool glass. One hug, she whispered, and the stars will never see me the same way again. The next morning dawned in a spectrum of soft blues and pale golds, spilling through Astral Station Epsilon's panoramic skylights. Vizara Tavari had been awake for hours, her mind replaying every detail of the previous day, the greeting, the embrace, the scandal that would echo through the Tavari networks within a single rotation. She had sent encrypted reports to House Tavari, carefully omitting the human's unorthodox gesture, replacing hug with unsanctioned physical contact of friendly nature. Even now, the memory lingered like static in her nerves. A Tavari's composure was her shield, yet Matt Davis had slipped past it as easily as sunlight through glass. The chamber doors opened with a soft hiss. The negotiation table stretched before her, again pristine and symmetrical, an island of order in the chaos that had followed their first meeting. Matt entered moments later, a cup of steaming coffee in one hand and a data slate in the other. He didn't wear the stiff formality of a uniform this time, instead a tailored civilian jacket with discreet Earth insignia. The gesture was deliberate, she realized, a show of informality meant to soften the mood, or to disarm her. "Morning, Lady Tavari," he greeted, flashing a smile that felt impossibly genuine. "Sleep well?" Vizara's eyes flicked up from her screen. "I rested adequately, Captain. I'd say barely, judging by those dark circles. You look like someone who's been fighting equations all night." She blinked. Tavari etiquette did not account for teasing, not in a diplomatic setting. "I reviewed the economic adjustments your delegation requested," she replied, tone crisp as crystal. "They are ambitious." "Humans like ambitious," he said lightly, taking the seat opposite her. "We find it makes life interesting." She didn't respond. Instead, she activated the holo projector, and a series of graphs shimmered into view. Dilithium yields energy output, planetary trade routes. Numbers calmed her. Numbers didn't hug without warning. "As I mentioned," she began, "House Tavari proposes increasing extraction quotas by 15%. In exchange, Earth receives exclusive access to the new atmospheric processors for agriculture. Your world's arid zones could feed 3 billion more people," Matt finished for her. "Yeah, I read the file." He leaned forward, elbows on the table. "It's good math, Vizara, but the Confederation isn't just numbers, it's people. And people get nervous when they feel exploited." Her expression cooled. "You imply House Tavari intends exploitation?" "I imply House Tavari intends efficiency," he said, unfazed. "But humans, we read efficiency as we're about to be undercut. It's a translation problem." Vizara hesitated, processing the strange mix of bluntness and diplomacy in his words. The Tavari prized indirectness, subtle turns of phrase that allowed both parties to save face. Humans, it seemed, carved through conversation with knives of honesty. "The Confederation functions because of rules," she said quietly. "Without them, chaos prevails." "Maybe," Matt said, tapping his stylus thoughtfully. "But sometimes chaos is where the truth hides." For a moment, silence stretched between them, not hostile, but heavy with unspoken thoughts. The hours bled together. They dissected trade balances, legal precedents, and the intricate web of interstellar taxation. Each time she thought she had regained her rhythm, Matt shattered it with a remark so personal it bypassed her defenses. "You always did this," he said once, after she countered one of his arguments. "Did what?" "That little tilt of your head when you think you've won. Used to drive me crazy when you were a kid." Vizara froze. "You recall our meeting?" "Fragments," he admitted. "A garden reflective pulls a girl who asked too many questions." He smiled faintly. "I didn't forget you, Vizara. I just didn't remember I remembered until yesterday." Her heart faltered. Tavari hearts were double-chambered, a trait evolution had designed for efficiency, and yet it betrayed her, now beating unevenly. "That was a decade ago," she managed. "You were part of a military attaché. More like a glorified bodyguard." Matt chuckled. "Your father didn't trust human envoys back then. I think I was assigned mostly to keep you entertained. You taught me to skip stones." His eyes softened. "And you made me promise to come back." The words struck her like gravity. She looked down at the negotiation table, pretending to study her data slate, though the numbers now blurred. She should have dismissed his familiarity. She should have reminded him of the gulf between them, not just species, but duty. Instead, she found herself fighting a smile. "Your people are reckless," she said finally. Matt grinned. "Guilty as charged. Among my people, discipline is the highest virtue. And among mine," he said, "courage is. Courage without discipline is chaos. Discipline without courage is extinction." Vizara exhaled sharply, somewhere between a sigh and laughter. "You argue like a philosopher. Or maybe just someone who likes winning debates with beautiful aliens." She blinked. Was that a compliment? "Observation," he said, voice lighter than air. She didn't know whether to feel flattered or offended. By midday, her assistant Thorne nearly vibrated with anxiety. The human captain's informal tone, the teasing, the glances, it was beyond scandalous. To the Tavari, diplomacy was theater. Every gesture had meaning. Matt Davis, however, had turned the stage into a playground. During the recess, Thorne cornered her in the antechamber. His pale blue skin was nearly white with distress. "My lady," he whispered, "the human captain's behavior borders on indecency. We should file a formal protest." Vizara stared at the holographic report in her hands, but her mind was elsewhere. Indecency, the word sounded archaic now. "No protest," she said quietly. "It would delay proceedings and risk offense to Earth's delegation." "Offense," Thorne sputtered. "He embraced you like a tavern companion." "Perhaps that is their way," she murmured. "They are tactile." "My lady, that will be all, Thorne." The aide bowed stiffly and withdrew, muttering prayers to the ancestors. When the door closed, Vizara pressed her hand to her chest. Her heart was still beating too fast. The negotiations resumed after the break. Yet the tone had shifted. The formality that once felt safe now seemed suffocating. Matt continued to push her boundaries, sometimes with logic, sometimes with charm. When she presented a carefully worded counterproposal, he leaned forward, his voice low. Vizara diplomacy doesn't always have to sound like a legal document. This is how progress is made," she replied, "through structure." "Maybe," he said, "but sometimes progress needs someone willing to color outside the lines." Their eyes met. The air between them felt alive, charged with something neither data nor treaties could quantify. Vizara looked away first. When the session finally adjourned, the Tavari delegation departed swiftly. Vizara remained, her composure cracked, but not broken. She gathered her notes with trembling hands. "Rough day," Matt asked, lingering near the exit. "Exhausting," she admitted before she could stop herself. "Then have dinner with me tonight." Her gaze snapped up. "Captain, that would be inappropriate," he finished. "Yeah, I've heard that word a lot since I got here." "Then you should learn it better." He smiled. "I'd rather learn you." The audacity made her heart stutter. "You are impossible." "That's what humans do best." After he left, the silence of the chamber pressed around her. Vizara stood there, staring at the chair he'd occupied. The faint scent of coffee lingered in the air, strange, earthy, comforting. Her people had built empires on logic and hierarchy. They conquered chaos by mastering control. But humans thrived in the very chaos Tavari civilization had spent millennia escaping. And somehow in that chaos, she found herself breathing easier. She turned toward the viewport again, where the nebula swirled in slow cosmic dance. Its light painted her reflection in hues of violet and blue. For the first time, she saw herself not as a diplomat or a daughter of House Tavari, but as a woman standing on the edge of something unknown. She whispered to her reflection, "He's reckless, but perhaps that's what it takes to move the stars." The dining hall of Astral Station Epsilon had been designed to impress diplomats. From every world, walls of transparent alloy, revealing the swirling violet nebula beyond, and a ceiling that mimicked a living sky. For Vizara Tavari, however, it felt like a stage, and she had been thrust into a play without a script. She had told herself she wouldn't come. Logic demanded distance. But logic had been losing every battle since Matt Davis had walked into her life again. When the chime at her door had sounded an hour earlier, she'd stood before the mirror far too long, debating. A Tavari diplomat was meant to wear the colors of her house, deep blues and silvers that proclaimed lineage. Yet when she finally left her quarters, she wore something softer, still elegant, but stripped of most insignias. The moment she saw herself in that mirror, she knew it wasn't the envoy leaving her quarters tonight, it was the woman. Now standing at the entrance of the hall, she spotted Matt instantly. He'd traded his formal uniform for something more casual, black jacket, crisp, white shirt, and the same disarming smile that had undone her composure more effectively than any weapon. "You came," he said simply, genuine warmth in his tone. "Against my better judgment," she replied. "Then let's make sure your judgment gets a night off." He offered his arm, a gallant gesture she recognized from human custom. She hesitated just long enough to feel foolish before placing her hand lightly on his sleeve. The warmth of his skin beneath the fabric startled her. Tavari physiology ran cooler than humans. The contrast felt intimate in a way she wasn't prepared for. They walked together to a table by the panoramic window. Outside, the nebula glowed like an ocean of cosmic fire blues and purples, folding into one another in infinite waves. I ordered for both of us, Matt said as they sat. I hope that's not too presumptuous. I suppose that depends on what you ordered, she said, arching a delicate brow. You'll see. A server approached a four-armed Paxian whose movements were fluid as silk. The table shimmered to life with dishes from two worlds, one platter of Terran cuisine, roasted proteins, fresh greens, a soft bread called focaccia, and beside it a Tavari delicacy, Niar root, seared in amber glaze, spiced in the way her people liked, aromatic and sharp. Vizara blinked, surprised. You remembered our cuisine. I did my research, Matt said with a grin. I was told Tavari taste buds crave complexity, so I brought competition. The Paxian waiter bowed and withdrew, leaving them in the subtle hum of background music, an instrumental blend of human strings and Tavari wind tones. It was haunting, beautiful, and impossibly intimate. Vizara folded her hands. This is improper, she murmured. We are in active negotiation. Then consider it a negotiation of understanding, Matt said. No titles tonight, just you and me. No titles, she repeated softly, tasting the forbidden simplicity of it. They began to eat. For several minutes, silence settled between them, not awkward, but contemplative. Vizara sampled the Terran dish first out of curiosity. The flavors were rich, grounded, alive. It felt emotional somehow. Her people ate for sustenance, not pleasure. This was different food that felt like conversation. When she looked up, Matt was watching her, amusement dancing in his eyes. And it's surprisingly good, she admitted. There's warmth in it. Earth cooking, he said proudly. We pour feelings into our food. It's why it's terrible when we're sad. Vizara smiled despite herself. My people would find that inefficient. Your people seem allergic to fun. We prefer stability. Stability is just another word for stagnation. She gave him a look that could have frozen an atmosphere, but there was no heat behind it, only curiosity. When she took a bite of her own dish, the shimmering Niar root, Matt leaned forward. Can I try? Vizara blinked. Among the Tavari, sharing food was intimate, a gesture usually reserved for family or bonded mates. But Matt couldn't possibly know that. Of course, she said cautiously. He took a small piece on his fork, tasted it, and his eyes lit up. That's incredible. Spicy, but it's got this kick. Like cinnamon and lightning had a baby. Despite herself, Vizara laughed. You're absurd. I prefer poetically inclined. Then before she could protest, he offered her a bite of his own dish. It was instinct or perhaps gravity that made her lean forward. She tasted it. Rich, tangy, completely alien to her senses. When she looked up, his gaze met hers. A flicker of recognition. Something ancient, something more than attraction passed between them. The air shifted. In my culture, she said softly, what we just did would be considered very forward. Sharing food, he asked, genuinely curious. It suggests a level of familiarity, usually reserved for partners. Matt smiled faintly. Then maybe I should be more careful. Maybe, she replied, or maybe not. The moment hung between them like a fragile glass sphere, vibrating with things neither dared say. As the evening unfolded, conversation flowed easier, less like debate, more like discovery. Matt asked about Tavari art, and she described crystalline sculptures that resonated with harmonic frequencies. She asked about Earth's oceans, and he told her of the smell of salt, of waves and storms and endless blue. You miss it, she observed. I do, he said. There's something grounding about knowing your world can drown you and still be beautiful. She tilted her head. That sounds terrifying. That's life, he said simply. It's terrifying, and that's what makes it worth living. She found herself studying him, not just the lines of his face, but the energy behind his words. There was no mask, no layers of ritual. He existed exactly as he was, unapologetic and real. You humans, she murmured. You live like flames, bright, unpredictable, always burning something to stay alive. He looked out toward the nebula. And you, Tavari, you live like stars, cold on the outside, burning quietly in the core. Her lips curved into a smile. Perhaps we're not so different then. Maybe not, he said, voice softer. After the main course, they lingered over drinks. The station's rotation created a slow drift of starlight across the table. Tell me something honest, he said suddenly. She frowned. Honesty is situational. He chuckled. That's the most Tavari answer I've ever heard. I'm serious, she said. Complete honesty is dangerous. It destabilizes trust. He leaned closer, or it builds it. Vizara hesitated, then exhaled. Fine, I'll answer one question honestly. Why did you come tonight? Her throat tightened. There were diplomatic answers she could give: curiosity, obligation, courtesy, but they all felt false. I came because I wanted to see if what I felt yesterday was real. Matt's expression softened. And is it? I don't know, she whispered. Humans are difficult to quantify. We're not equations, Vizara. That's precisely the problem, she said with a faint smile. The Paxian returned to clear the dishes, bowing politely. When they were alone again, Matt rested his arms on the table, his gaze never leaving her. You know, yesterday when I hugged you, she tensed slightly. Yes, I didn't plan it. I just saw you and thought about that little girl by the reflecting pools. Her breath caught. And before I knew it, he continued, my heart moved faster than my head. Your heart, she echoed as though testing the word. Yeah, he said with a grin. Humans have a bad habit of listening to it. She looked down, unsure whether to smile or reprimand him again. Among my people, that habit can lead to disgrace. Among mine, it leads to poetry. He reached across the table, his fingers brushing lightly against hers. The contact was brief but electric. She didn't pull away. In Tavari culture, she said, voice barely a whisper, touch has rules. And what do they say about this? He asked, his thumb tracing small circles on her palm. That there should be none of it, she breathed, especially in public. He smiled. Then it's a good thing the stars don't count as witnesses. Her laugh was soft, startled, and real. Hours later, as they walked through the station's arboretum, Vizara felt strangely unguarded. The air smelled faintly of alien blossoms, bioluminescent petals lighting their path. In my world, she said, courtship is a series of structured stages. Intentions are declared. Permissions are granted. There are ceremonies for every step. Matt glanced at her. And what does your culture say about breaking the rules? It says chaos follows. Then maybe chaos isn't always bad. He stopped beside a reflective pool, one that mirrored the stars like liquid glass. Do you remember this? He asked softly. She stared into the water. The memory came back, a young human laughing, teaching her to skip stones. Yes, she said, I remember. He handed her a smooth pebble. Show me if you've improved. She smiled, threw it, and the stone danced across the water 5 times before sinking. Still perfect, he murmured. When she turned to face him, he was closer than she expected. The nebula's glow painted his features in blues and golds. Matt, she began, but his hand brushed her cheek, tentative, waiting. This is madness, she whispered. Maybe, he said, but it feels right. And when he kissed her softly like a question, Vizara Tavari understood for the first time why humans valued instinct. No Tavari ritual could have prepared her for this. When Vizara awoke the next morning, the nebula outside her viewport burned crimson instead of blue, a rare atmospheric shift that mirrored the chaos inside her mind. The previous night replayed in flashes, laughter, touch, lips meeting beneath starlight. It had been unthinkable, reckless, intoxicating. Now it was reality. She sat by the window in silence, her teacup cooling untouched beside her. The hollow news feeds were already whispering. Human captains seen dining with Tavari envoy. Improper contact during negotiations. Cultural breach or budding alliance. Each headline cut deeper than the last. Her people thrived on order. Scandal was a disease. The door chimed. Enter, she said quietly. Thorne stepped in, looking pale, even for a Tavari. His hands shook as he bowed. My lady, urgent communication from Confederation Command. And he hesitated, your father. Vizara's blood ran cold. Lord Kalen Tavari. Yes, my lady, he is en route to Astral Station Epsilon, without announcement or escort. Impossible. Her father never traveled without ceremonial convoys or weeks of preparation. For him to arrive unannounced, he knows, she murmured. Thorne nodded grimly. The human networks broadcasted footage from the Arboretum. A civilian drone recorded your interaction with Captain Davis. Vizara's fingers tightened around her cup until the porcelain cracked. Have the footage sealed. It's already viral, Thorne said helplessly. Across 15 systems. Even the Vorai channels are amplifying it. Of course they were. The Vorai Consortium, Tavari's ancient rivals, would weaponize this. To them, the image of a Tavari noble embracing a human was humiliation served cold. Prepare my formal attire, Vizara said, standing abruptly, and cancel today's negotiations. My Lady Thorne stammered the human delegation. We'll wait. By the time her father's shuttle docked, the station was a hive of tension. Security drones hovered in formation. Delegates whispered in corners. The air itself seemed heavier. Vizara stood at the airlock, posture flawless, her robes heavy with silver insignias of House Tavari. It was armor not against weapons, but against shame. The hatch opened with a hiss of pressurized air scented with ceremonial incense. Lord Callan Tavari emerged. Even surrounded by attendants, he was a presence that dominated the corridor. Tall, silver-haired, his skin a deeper shade of azure marked with the golden tracery of lineage tattoos. His gaze, when it found her, was cold enough to freeze atmospheres. Father Vizara said, performing the greeting gesture, right hand over heart, left extended palm up. House Tavari welcomes your presence. Save the formality, he said sharply. We have much to discuss. Without waiting, he swept past her robes, trailing like storm clouds. Vizara followed in silence, every eye in the hall burning into her back. The private chamber was small by Tavari standards, simple walls, a long table, and 2 chairs that seemed suddenly too close together. Lord Callan stood at the viewport gazing into the nebula. Ambassador Nex of the Vorai Consortium contacted me personally, he said without turning. He sent footage of my daughter, consorting with a human. Vizara swallowed hard. The footage is taken out of context. Her father turned, eyes narrowing. Out of context, he held you, Vizara, in public. During an active negotiation, you are heir to one of the Confederation's founding houses. What context redeems that? She met his stare, forcing steadiness into her voice. Captain Davis acted according to human custom. Do not insult me with excuses, you allowed it. The words hit harder than any blow. Father, you shamed our house. Do you realize what the Vorai will claim now that House Tavari has already chosen sides? That your affection for a human compromises our neutrality. It is not affection, she lied. Then what is it? A mistake. The lie tasted bitter. Lord Callan studied her for a long, silent moment. Perhaps, but a costly one. He moved closer, lowering his voice. You will end this, whatever it is, immediately. Vizara forced herself not to look away. And what of the alliance, the negotiations, the progress we've made? Progress, he scoffed. You've jeopardized everything. Earth's representatives are petitioning for equality within the Confederation. Now, thanks to you, they will claim personal influence within Tavari ranks. Matt Davis is not manipulative, she said sharply before realizing the slip. Her father's expression hardened. You call him by his name. The silence that followed was suffocating. A soft chime interrupted them. The door slid open and Captain Matt Davis stepped inside. For a heartbeat, no one spoke. Vizara's heart plummeted. He was supposed to stay away. Yet here he was wearing full diplomatic uniform, again posture formal, face calm but resolute. He bowed with Tavari precision, one hand over heart, one extended the perfect replication of her people's gesture. Lord Tavari, he said in flawless Tavari language, accent rough but intelligible. It is an honor. Her father's eyes flicked with surprise. You speak our tongue. I studied it after my first visit to your world, Matt said evenly. I believed understanding another culture begins with its language. And yet you chose to disregard our most sacred protocol in your greeting to my daughter. Matt straightened, his expression respectful but unyielding. With respect, Lord Tavari, I greeted her as a human greets a cherished friend. It was meant as an honor, not an insult. Lord Callan's voice was deceptively calm. And the footage of you together last night, was that also an honor? Among my people, Matt said quietly, we celebrate bonds born of trust and mutual respect. My relationship with Vizara is not a matter of strategy, it's personal. Vizara flinched. He had said it out loud in front of her father. Personal. Lord Callan's tone dripped with disdain. For a Tavari of noble blood there is no personal. Every act carries political weight. Then perhaps Matt replied, that's why change is needed. Vizara's breath caught. No one spoke to Lord Callan Tavari that way, not even within his own council. Her father studied Matt with newfound scrutiny. You propose to alter traditions that have stood for millennia. Some traditions outlive their purpose, Matt said. Humanity learned that the hard way. Customs that don't bend eventually break. A long silence followed. Then unexpectedly, Lord Callan chuckled low and humorless. You speak with conviction, Captain. Perhaps too much. Tell me, is this passion what drew my daughter to you? Father Vizara began, but Matt interrupted. I can't speak for her, he said. But I can tell you this, I didn't fall for the diplomat. I fell for the woman who hides behind diplomacy because she's afraid of what her heart might cost her. Vizara's face flushed deep indigo. Matt, that's enough. No, Lord Callan said softly. Let him speak. Matt took a breath. You think this is scandal? Maybe it is. But you also know in your bones that alliances built on fear collapse. You taught her to follow rules. Maybe it's time someone showed her how to follow her soul. For the first time in her life, Vizara saw her father hesitate, just slightly. You assume much human, Lord Callan said finally. Yet your words remind me of something. Long buried. He turned to his daughter. Perhaps the ancestors guided my hand when I began the arrangements months ago. Vizara blinked. Arrangement. For a political union between House Tavari and Earth. Her heart stopped. A union, father, you can't mean. He nodded. A formal alliance sealed by marriage. The details were in negotiation long before your mission began. She stared at him, horror dawning. You arranged my marriage to a human representative of high standing, Lord Callan said. Then his gaze shifted toward Matt, a man with an impeccable record courage and a history with our family. Matt frowned. You mean? Yes, Lord Callan said simply. It was you. The silence that followed felt like the pause between heartbeats before a supernova. Vizara's mind reeled. All this time, all her father's disapproval, and yet he had chosen Matt. You arranged it before knowing she began. Before knowing the galaxy would watch you embrace him, her father finished. The irony is poetic. Outside the chamber, the nebula flared, casting rippling colors across the walls. Matt turned to Vizara, his expression unreadable. So the universe had a plan for us all along. Her father folded his arms. Plans mean nothing without obedience. If this union is to proceed, it will be formalized through proper ceremony under Tavari law. And if I refuse, Vizara asked quietly. Lord Callan's gaze softened for the briefest instant, the father peeking through the Lord. Then you will face disgrace. But you will do so as my daughter, not my heir. Vizara straightened her shoulders. Then I will not refuse. Matt looked at her in shock. Vizara. She turned to him, voice steady but eyes trembling. If this is to be our punishment, then let it also be our choice. Lord Callan studied them both, two figures standing side by side against the weight of centuries. Finally, he nodded once. Then prepare yourselves. The ceremony will take place at dawn. As the elder departed, Matt and Vizara were left alone in the quiet aftermath. Did you mean that, he asked softly? About choice. She looked up at him, weary, defiant, heartbreakingly sincere. I meant that sometimes the only way to survive tradition is to redefine it. He stepped closer. Then we'll redefine it together. Outside, the nebula pulsed as if the universe itself was holding its breath. The dawn of the ceremony came painted in the colors of war. The nebula beyond Astral Station Epsilon blazed in hues of crimson and gold, its light scattering across the observation deck, where the union of House Tavari and Earth was set to take place. Every corridor hummed with tension. Tavari guards stood in mirrored formation beside Earth's honor guard. Diplomats filled the grand atrium, their eyes bright with anticipation and skepticism. For the Confederation, this ceremony symbolized unity. For many, it was sacrilege. Vizara Tavari adjusted the mantle draped across her shoulders. The ceremonial fabric shimmered like molten silver embroidered with her family's lineage sigils. The attire weighed more than armor, a burden of history pressing against her chest. She stared at her reflection one last time. Her reflection looked composed, untouchable, divine, but her hands trembled. She whispered to herself, poise, protocol, power. Then she added something new in heart. Behind her, the chamber door opened. Matt Davis entered wearing full formal regalia, Earth's navy blue uniform lined with silver trim, medals gleaming against his chest. But it wasn't the uniform that caught her breath. It was the steadiness in his eyes. You look. He began, then paused, searching for a word that could capture it. Otherworldly. And you look uncomfortable in that, she teased softly. Yeah, he admitted, pulling at his collar. I prefer jackets and chaos. For a fleeting second, they smiled at each other, and the universe outside their window felt small enough to hold in a heartbeat. Then the announcement came. By decree of the Confederation Council, the ceremonial union between Captain Matthew Davis of Earth and Vizara Tavari of House Tavari will commence. The grand atrium was a cathedral of light. Transparent alloy panels framed the void of space where thousands of observers watched through holographic broadcasts. A dais of crystal stood at the center, carved with both Tavari and Terran symbols, interlocking spirals representing convergence. Vizara and Matt walked side by side down the aisle, followed by delegates' banners and drones capturing every moment. The hum of cameras and translators filled the air like static before a storm. Lord Callan Tavari waited at the dais, flanked by Confederation officials. His face was the perfect mask of stoicism. When his gaze met his daughter's, something almost human flickered there: pride, fear, resignation. The officiant raised a hand. Today we witness the merging of two worlds, one of order, one of courage, bound not by conquest but by choice. Matt glanced sideways at Vizara. Choice, huh? She whispered back, try not to ruin the speech. Can't promise that. Despite herself, she smiled. The first half of the ceremony followed the ancient Tavari script, declarations of lineage, vows of loyalty to the Confederation, and the symbolic exchange of sigils. Vizara's voice was steady, precise, each syllable honed by centuries of tradition. When Matt's turn came, he ignored the pre-written oath. Instead, he looked straight into the hollow cameras and said, I pledge not just alliance but understanding, not just peace but connection. Humanity's strength has never been in obedience, it's in empathy. A murmur rippled through the crowd. The officiant blinked. Vizara's heart thudded painfully, half fear, half admiration. He was rewriting history mid-ceremony. Her father's jaw tightened, but he did not interrupt. Then as the final stage began, the symbolic clasping of hands before the assembled witnesses, the air changed. The lights flickered. A low hum, deep and wrong, vibrated through the floor. Vizara's instincts sharpened instantly. She glanced toward the upper gallery, where a faint shimmer betrayed movement behind the glass. Matt followed her gaze. You see it too. Security breach, she whispered. Before the officiant could continue, a pulse of energy tore through the air. The blast shattered half the observation window, sucking a rush of oxygen and debris toward open space. The station's shield field activated instantly, sealing the breach in a cascade of blue light, but the damage was done. Screams erupted, delegates scrambled for cover, guards shouted orders in multiple languages. Get down, Matt shouted, grabbing Vizara and pulling her behind the crystalline dais just as another explosion rocked the hall. Security drones swarmed in. Through the smoke, humanoid figures in black armor appeared Vordai mercenaries, their insignias glowing red. Of course it's them, Vizara hissed. Matt reached for the side holster of his uniform, pulling a compact kinetic pistol. So much for peace talks. You brought a weapon to a ceremony, she demanded, incredulous. He grinned, human instinct. The next few minutes unfolded in chaos. The grand atrium became a war zone of shattered glass and flashing plasma fire. Vizara activated the defensive shield woven into her ceremonial cloak. A faint aura of gold enveloped her. She ducked behind cover, scanning the attacker's formation. They're not here to kill delegates, she realized. They're targeting the Union itself. Matt fired a burst, hitting one assailant square in the chest. Figures. Some people just can't handle mixed marriages. Stay behind me, Vizara said. Not a chance. He tapped the comm on his wrist. Command, this is Captain Davis. We've got a Vordai assault team inside the atrium. Contain and reinforce now. Static. The communication channels were jammed. Vizara's cloak flickered as a plasma bolt struck it, the energy scattering across the golden weave. They've hacked the station grid. Then we're on our own, Matt said grimly. She turned to him. You could run. He met her gaze, steady, defiant. Not my style. And then he was gone, diving from cover, firing as he moved. The human soldier inside him, long dormant, woke with precision and fury. Vizara watched in stunned disbelief as he ducked, rolled, and countered with seamless efficiency. Every movement was raw, instinctual, the very chaos her people feared wielded like an art form. When one mercenary lunged toward her, Matt crossed the distance in a blink, tackling the attacker and slamming him into the wall. Don't touch her, he growled before firing point blank. Vizara's heart pounded. He was reckless, brilliant, alive, and somehow amid the destruction, she felt safer beside him than behind any army. The battle raged. A burst of plasma hit the dais, fracturing it. Energy crackled through the air. Vizara's father, Lord Kalen, drew a ceremonial blade that hummed with Tavari resonance, once a symbol of honor, now a weapon again. Kalen Matt shouted, ducking another bolt. "They're trying to breach the reactor core." Her father turned sharply. "Then we stop them here." Side by side, human Tavari and Noble, they fought like old gods reborn. Vizara used her arm implants to project energy barriers, deflecting enemy fire as Matt advanced. Kalen's blade sang through the air, cutting down two mercenaries with terrifying grace. But there were too many. The ceiling groaned a fissure tearing across the structure. Vizara looked up just in time to see a section collapsing. "Matt," she shouted. He turned to saw it and moved without thinking. He leaped, catching her as the structure gave way. They hit the ground, hard dust and sparks raining over them. For a moment, silence, then pain flared in his shoulder. She pushed herself up. "You're hurt." "Just a scratch." He wasn't lying, but the blood staining his sleeve was dark and heavy. "Stay with me," she said, pressing a trembling hand to his wound. "Always," he murmured. Her fingers glowed faintly, Tavari bioluminescence, activating as she transferred healing energy through touch, an intimate act reserved for kin. "Protocol would call this inappropriate," she whispered. "Protocol's dead," he rasped, managing a smile. "We just killed it." The last of the mercenaries fell when reinforcements finally breached the hall. Smoke hung in the air like ghosts. The once pristine chamber lay in ruins, banners torn, glass shattered, and the dais cracked in two. Vizara stood amid the wreckage, cloak, torn hair, disheveled but alive. Matt leaned against her, one arm draped over her shoulders. Lord Kalen approached, his blade dripping with plasma residue. He surveyed the devastation, then the two of them bloodied but unbroken. "The galaxy saw your union," he said, quietly. "Not in ceremony, but in battle." Vizara met his gaze. "Then let them see what unity truly means." Her father hesitated, then nodded slowly. He raised his voice, projecting through the surviving comm systems. "Let it be recorded, the ceremony shall not be postponed. The union of Earth and Tavari will proceed here now upon the ashes of division." The crowd, shaken, wounded but alive, erupted in cheers and sobs. Matt blinked at Vizara. "He's serious." She smiled through the tears. "He's Tavari. Once he decides, not even gods can change his mind." They returned to the fractured dais. The officiant, bruised but breathing, stumbled forward. "Under witness of life and stars," he said hoarsely, "do you, Captain Matthew Davis, and you, Vizara Tavari, choose this bond freely?" Matt looked at her, and for once, no teasing, no irony. Just truth, always. Vizara's voice trembled. "I do." Their hands met, blood ash and light mingling as one. The nebula outside pulsed in a breathtaking surge of color, as though the universe itself was exhaling. And there, amid ruin and rebirth, a new legend was born. He hugged her once to greet her, the holofeeds would say twice to save her, and a third time to make her his. The explosion had ended hours ago. The fire, the smoke, the fear, all gone, leaving only silence and starlight. But the echo of what had happened refused to fade. By dawn, the story had already gone beyond Astral Station Epsilon. It had crossed borders and networks and worlds. The footage of the human and the Tavari standing hand in hand amid destruction had spread like wildfire. Every broadcast replayed the same moment, the shattered dust, the debris swirling around them. Matt's arm wrapped protectively around Vizara as she whispered the words, "I do." The feeds named it the hug that changed the stars. At first it was gossip, then curiosity, then reverence. By the second rotation, it had become legend. For Vizara, the days following the ceremony passed in a blur of meetings, interviews, and endless messages from every corner of the Confederation. Her personal channel overflowed with requests, Tavari nobles condemning her human leaders, praising her alien envoys, analyzing her. She found it exhausting. In her new quarters on Tavari Prime, she sat by the window gazing out at the planet's twin moons reflected on the ocean below. Matt was still asleep, his breathing even and deep. The faint scars on his shoulder, a reminder of the attack, caught the moonlight like silver lines. It was strange. For all her training, all her years mastering the art of diplomacy, the universe had never felt this simple. One man, one choice, one impossible moment that had changed everything. Her communication device pulsed. Another incoming message. She sighed, activating it. The holographic image of her father appeared. "Father," she greeted, rising to her feet automatically. "Daughter," he said, his tone softer than she remembered. "How fares the human?" "Recovering. Slowly. Good. He fights well. Foolishly, but well." Vizara smiled faintly. "It seems to be a human trait." Lord Kalen nodded, his eyes glinting with a rare trace of amusement. "Perhaps one worth learning." He paused, studying her. "Do you understand what you've done, Vizara?" She straightened. "Yes, I united two houses. I fulfilled the union you decreed." He shook his head. "You did more than that. You tore open the very walls that kept our species apart." "Then maybe they needed tearing," she said. Her father's silence lingered for a long moment before he said quietly, "You are still my daughter, and perhaps the galaxies too." The transmission ended. Vizara stood there for a moment, the words sinking in. Her father, the man who once worshipped protocol, had accepted what she'd become. Maybe love really could rewrite the laws of stars. Later that day, she found Matt in the garden of their new estate, half Tavari, half Terran design. The air smelled of salt and blossoms. He was kneeling near a pool, teaching a group of Tavari children how to skip stones. "Flick the wrist," he said, demonstrating. The pebble skimmed across the water 5 perfect times. The children gasped and laughed. "You're turning Tavari nobles into Terran troublemakers," Vizara said, walking up behind him. He looked over his shoulder, grinning. "Cultural exchange program. You're enjoying yourself too much." "Can you blame me? You've got entire worlds calling us heroes." She sighed, "and others calling us blasphemy incarnate." "Sounds balanced," he said cheerfully. She crouched beside him, her reflection mingling with his in the water. "Do you ever wonder if we went too far?" He glanced at her, serious now. "Every day. But then I remember why we did it." "For love," she teased lightly. "For honesty," he said. "You and me, we didn't hide behind flags or houses. We showed them something real. And now they can't pretend they don't see it." Vizara was silent. Then softly, "Sometimes I forget humans are poets." He chuckled. "Only when we're in trouble." The Confederation Summit convened 2 weeks later. For the first time in history, the assembly chamber wasn't divided by species. Humans, Tavari Paxians, and even Vorai sat in shared rows. Vizara stood beside Matt at the central podium. Together they represented the newly formed Human-Tavari Alliance, a model the Council intended to expand to other species. When the time came to speak, she looked out over the sea of faces, some hostile, some hopeful. "I once believed in perfection," she began. "In rules and formality and distance. My people taught that emotion clouds reason and connection breeds weakness." She paused, glancing at Matt. "But then a human embraced me, and I learned that reason without heart builds nothing worth protecting." Her voice carried through the hall, low and resonant. "Some of you see scandal. Others see progress. But I see truth. Every law, every border, every protocol we built was born of fear. And fear has ruled us long enough." A ripple of applause began, hesitant, then growing. Matt stepped forward, taking over seamlessly. "We're not asking anyone to forget their culture. We're asking everyone to evolve it. The galaxy's too big for walls and too small for hate. What started as a broken rule has become a bridge." By the time he finished, the entire chamber was standing. Even the Vorai delegation, their new ambassador, a cautious diplomat named Leth, gave a reluctant nod. Weeks passed and the alliance flourished. Trade routes expanded. Scientific exchanges doubled. Joint academies opened between Earth and Tavari Prime. For the first time in recorded history, human art was exhibited in Tavari galleries, chaotic brushstrokes and passionate colors admired by species that once found emotion distasteful. In turn, Tavari precision architecture began reshaping human cities, clean, radiant, alive with alien symmetry. Everywhere, small signs of change bloomed. Mixed couples walking through markets, shared languages merging into hybrids, laughter echoing across worlds that once only whispered. And always somewhere on a broadcast or data pad, their story replayed the union that began with one reckless hug. Late one evening, months after the summit, Matt and Vizara walked through the same arboretum where everything had begun. The bioluminescent flowers swayed in the artificial breeze. The reflecting pool shimmered with memory. "It feels smaller now," Matt said softly. "Or maybe we've grown," she replied. They stopped beside the water. Vizara reached into her pocket and pulled out a small object, a smooth stone. You kept it, he said, smiling. It's the one that started all this chaos. She handed it to him. I thought you should have it. He turned it over in his palm, tracing the faint Tavari engraving she had added two spirals intertwined. You know, I've been thinking. Dangerous habit. I want to build something, he said. Not just politics or treaties of place. A bridge between our worlds. What kind of place? A station. Neutral ground. A haven where no species leads and none kneels. Where diplomats can speak without fear and lovers don't have to hide. Vizara's eyes softened. You'd call it what? He smiled. Epsilon Prime, after the place where it all began. Her breath caught. You think they'd allow it? They won't have a choice. The galaxy's already watching us. She looked up at the nebula beyond the glass, the same nebula that had witnessed their kiss, their fight, their defiance. Then let's give them something worth watching. Months later, construction began. The blueprint of Epsilon Prime spread across holoscreens, a shining station built by both human and Tavari hands. Its core inscription read, Connection over Protocol. It became the rallying cry of a generation. From the farthest colonies to the heart of Earth itself, the story of Vizara Tavari and Captain Matt Davis became legend. Children acted it out in schools. Artists sculpted their likenesses. Poets called them the embrace that breathed the Confederation to life. Yet for the two who had lived it, legend was irrelevant. In their private quarters, they lived quietly tending to the garden, laughing over breakfast, arguing over which species brewed better coffee. And sometimes when the night was still, Matt would pull her close, whispering against her temple. You realize we broke the galaxy's oldest rule. Vizara would smile in the dark. Then we'll just write new ones. And he'd kiss her gentle infinite, while outside the stars burned brighter than ever, as if the universe itself was learning how to love. 1 year after the Battle of Epsilon, the galaxy was no longer the same. What began as scandal had become scripture, quoted in speeches, etched in monuments, whispered in the hearts of those who dared to believe that love could conquer culture, law, and even logic. The human-Tavari alliance had blossomed beyond anyone's predictions. Its reach stretched from the crystal spires of Tavari Prime to the oceans of Earth, to the glittering colonies at the edge of mapped space. Trade flourished, art transcended translation, and in place of suspicion, curiosity began to bloom. But it wasn't just politics that changed, it was the idea of connection. For the first time, species across the Confederation began greeting one another not with bows or salutes, but with the simple act that had started it all, a hug. It was clumsy, awkward, often hilarious to watch a four-armed Paxian or a crystalline Vethian attempt it, but it was real, a gesture of trust. The historians would later call it the era of the embrace. On the first anniversary of the attack, Astral Station Epsilon had been reborn. Where broken glass once floated, a new structure gleamed, the Epsilon Prime Cultural Summit, a massive ring-shaped station co-built by humans and Tavari. Its motto was carved into the entrance in both languages, Connection over Protocol. Beneath it stood two statues, one of Vizara Tavari poised and proud, her hand extended, the other of Captain Matt Davis smiling as he reached to meet it. Between them, a single word floated in hard light script, together. As the crowd gathered for the grand rededication ceremony, Vizara stood before the mirror, adjusting the subtle silver cuffs on her diplomatic attire. It had been a long time since she had worn the colors of House Tavari, but today wasn't about family or heritage, it was about legacy. Behind her, Matt appeared in his own uniform, not Terran navy blue, not Tavari silver, but a hybrid of both white trimmed in violet, a fusion of worlds stitched into every thread. You ready? He asked. Vizara turned, smiling faintly. Do I have a choice? He grinned. Nope. You're the face of an interstellar revolution, remember? I preferred being a quiet disgrace, she said dryly. He chuckled. Too late for that. The amphitheater of Epsilon Prime opened to the stars. Thousands filled the tiered balconies, representatives from 17 worlds, their banners rippling under artificial gravity. A choir of Paxians sang in harmonic resonance, their voices weaving through the hum of the crowd like wind through glass. When Vizara stepped onto the central platform, silence fell, a silence so deep it seemed to stretch across light years. Fellow delegates, she began, her voice steady, amplified across the station a year ago. This place was shattered by fear. We were divided by pride, by custom, by the belief that difference meant danger. She paused, letting her gaze sweep across the assembly. But the universe has a strange sense of humor. It took one human's reckless gesture, a hug, to remind us that empathy is not weakness. It is the first language we all understand. Applause erupted. Matt joined her, stepping forward with his characteristic ease. I used to think rules were there to keep us from messing things up. Turns out some rules exist just to be broken the right way. Laughter rippled through the chamber, a sound once unthinkable in a Tavari gathering. He continued, when Vizara and I stood here a year ago, we didn't plan to start a movement. We just wanted to be honest. Honest with ourselves and with each other. And that honesty spread faster than any war or treaty ever could. The delegates leaned in, even the notoriously stoic Vorai. Matt turned toward Vizara. You once told me humans live like flames, burning too fast. But maybe that's what the stars needed, a little fire to remind them they could still shine. The audience rose to their feet in a standing ovation. Vizara smiled, the faint shimmer of tears in her sky-colored eyes. Then let this flame never go out. After the speeches, the delegates mingled. Journalists floated through the crowd like curious satellites, capturing, quote, smiles and gestures. Lord Callan Tavari, now older but strangely lighter in spirit, approached his daughter. His formal robes had been replaced by a simpler tunic, a symbolic act that sent ripples through Tavari society. You spoke well, he said. High praise from you, Father, Vizara replied, bowing slightly. You've made me reconsider many things, perhaps even the definition of tradition. She tilted her head. You, the man who once said change is chaos. He allowed himself a faint smile. Perhaps I've learned that some chaos brings order of a higher kind. Matt appeared beside them, extending his hand. It's good to see you again, sir. Lord Callan looked at the human's hand, then instead of shaking it, he pulled Matt into a brief formal Tavari embrace. You've infected me with your customs, the old lord muttered, stepping back. Matt grinned. You wear it well. Later that night, the celebration spilled into the observation deck. The nebula, the same that had framed their first meeting, bathed the station in violet light. Music filled the air, a blend of Terran strings and Tavari harmonic waves. Dignitaries danced, laughed, and mingled like children under a new dawn. Vizara leaned against the railing, watching. You realize what's happening, she murmured. Matt joined her. Yeah, nobody's checking titles, no one's measuring etiquette. They're just being people. It's chaos, she said, smiling. It's beautiful, he countered. They stood in silence for a moment, gazing at the galaxy that had once seemed so cold. Do you ever think about what might have happened if you hadn't hugged me that day, she asked softly. Matt laughed. Yeah, you'd probably still be giving terrifying speeches in a mirror, and I'd still be getting reprimanded for being too friendly. She nudged him playfully. You call this friendly? He leaned closer. I call it destiny. As the night deepened, a group of young cadets approached human Tavari and Paxian alike. One of them, a wide-eyed Tavari girl, barely 20, bowed awkwardly. Ambassador Tavari Davis, she said nervously. I wanted to thank you. My parents were against me joining the exchange program. They said humans were impulsive. But after seeing what you both did, she trailed off, eyes shining. They changed their minds. I'm here because of you. Vizara smiled gently, placing a hand on the girl's shoulder, a gesture that once would have been unthinkable for a Tavari noble. Then promise me something. Anything. Don't just learn our rules. Break them when you must, but always for the right reason. The girl nodded solemnly. Matt grinned. See, she's already teaching rebellion. It's called growth, Vizara corrected. Same thing, he said. Months turned into seasons. Epsilon Prime became the new heart of the Confederation, a living monument to what one act of human recklessness had created. Every year, new species joined the alliance. Tavari scholars began studying Terran emotional psychology. Human children learned Tavari philosophy in schools. Even the Vorai grudgingly at first began trading openly with both. Artists captured it all, murals of the first embrace painted on asteroid colonies, symphonies written to mimic the rhythm of two heartbeats, synchronizing. And in the center of the cultural shift stood two figures, not rulers, not saints, but living proof that empathy could be stronger than pride. On the second anniversary of their union, a special broadcast aired across every inhabited system. It was a simple message, a recorded transmission from Vizara and Matt sent from Epsilon Prime's observation deck. To every world that still believes difference is danger, Vizar said, remember the stars themselves are born from collisions. And to anyone told that love has no place in politics, Matt added, we say this love is politics. It's the hardest kind, the kind that demands you see the other side and still reach out anyway. The universe doesn't need more protocol, Vizar concluded. It needs more courage. And more hugs, Matt grinned. Especially those. Years later, historians would still debate what made that moment, that first forbidden embrace, so powerful. Some said it was timing, others said it was destiny. But the truth whispered in the halls of Epsilon Prime was simpler. It wasn't about rebellion or romance, it was about recognition. One soul seeing another not as alien, not as diplomat, but as human in all but shape. And that recognition became a light the stars could no longer ignore. On the 10th anniversary, an old tradition formed. Across the Confederation, people of every species would greet each other, not with bows, not with salutes, but with an embrace, a quiet acknowledgement that connection was the only protocol that ever mattered. They called it Unity Day. And every year under nebulous skies, someone somewhere would tell the story. Once an alien girl expected a ceremonial greeting, but a human hugged her, and the galaxy hasn't been the same since.